There is one thing that this lens has that absolutely blows away the Sony G lens. And this thing caught me by surprise.
Yo, what's the story? There's no way a lens that costs less than $200 is actually any good. I mean, look at the size of this thing. You know, like, there's no way this Viltrox 20mm lens can be any good. No way. It's got 10 elements in 8 groups, including 2 extra low dispersion lenses. It's got 1 high refractive index lens and 2 spherical lenses. That sounds expensive, but it's not. There's a HD nano multi-layer coating with water resistant. It's got a focus motor that's got a noiseless stepper motor, so that means the focusing is accurate and it should be pretty smooth. The minimum focus distance is approximately 19 centimeters, so you can get pretty close-up shots. And there's one other thing. For a lens that's less than $200. See that? Yeah. That's a USB-C port, so you can update the firmware, and they've already put out a firmware update to help with stabilization and image shake. Yeah, this does not feel like a $200 lens. Less than $200 lens. It feels probably like a $300-400 lens. It does not feel premium. I mean, for the best part, it's plastic. Okay, the focus motor here, this focus ring, doesn't feel amazing, but it seems okay. But for less than $200, what are you expecting? I'm really curious. This thing for $200, there's no way this can be any good.
This is what this Viltrox 20mm 2.8 lens looks at. We're on the Sony ZV-E1 on the worst possible conditions. We are on active steady shot, so more on how this looks like with dynamic stabilization in a sec. But this camera right now is on shutter priority, so we can keep that 2.8, and yeah, it's at 1/8000 shutter speed, which is not a good idea at all because movement looks, as you can see, not good. However, that does raise one thing. There is a kind of a non-standard, well, I wouldn't say non-standard, but it's probably one of the more bizarre filter thread sizes. Not everyone is going to have ND filters that will fit this, so you'll have to buy one if you're going to use an ND filter to get that buttery smooth cinematic 1/50. Now, whatever with that, dynamic stabilization, how does that look? Dynamic stabilization on the Sony ZV-E1, obviously a lot better, but you can see there is a crop now. I do have the ZV-E1 at arm's length, so I try not to die. So there is a crop, so you are pushed in, and I'm really stretching out here. And look at these dudes. So, is 20mm wide enough for dynamic stabilization? I think it is. What about if we compare this 20mm lens to the Sony 20mm lens, which is a lot more expensive, more or less nearly 4 times as expensive as this lens? Is it worth the upgrade? Well, you tell me. This is the Sony 20mm G lens 1.8, but we're driving this at 2.8 right now, and this is dynamic stabilization. Now, from the last image to this image, is it really worth the upgrade? What about active steady shot? Again, at that stupid shutter speed of 1/8000 just to keep everything at 2.8. But yeah, this is what it essentially looks like. Is it the end of the world? This is where you can jump into the comments and go, Vic, this is absolutely worth more money than that cheap Viltrox lens. Or it could be the complete opposite. So let me know in the comments right now though what you think the difference is, because is there going to be a difference in things like autofocus and those kinds of things? Because that's something that, well, I ain't going to do that test here. It's going to get blown away. Let's jump back to the studio.
Funnily enough, both of these lenses actually missed focus at different times. Just once, but for the best part, I mean, you can see, and from been recording this video for a while now, like if you look around here on the screen on the ZV-E1, and this is the Viltrox, camera has no problem focusing, autofocus. Let's go all the way back, zero problem. And let's give you guys a real, oh, I nearly knocked the other camera. Let's give you guys a real treat here. So, yeah. This thing just works. I'm not going to get bogged down in the technical side here. I don't have a lens chart, so I can't show you how sharp or how kind of soft it is at the corners, but I think you can judge from here. There's not a huge lot between the two lenses, okay? When it comes to distortion, quite similar. The actual chromatic aberration seems to be non-existent. I really don't understand how Viltrox have made a lens this good for this cheap. But with cheapness, there is some kind of cut-offs. And the big thing really for me is that you lose the functionality. It is nice to have the aperture on the actual lens itself versus having to dial it in on the camera, but not a big deal. Is it worth, 4 times the price? Probably not. It would be nice to have an auto and a manual focus switch on the lens as opposed to diving into the actual camera to do it. That does make the workflow of this lens a little bit cumbersome, but is that button worth 4 times as much? Probably not. Would be nice to have a custom button on the lens. Is that worth 4 times as much? For me anyway, definitely not. There's a couple of the disadvantages, and yes, the other one technically is better, not by much. Ultimately, you got to think about your audience, okay? So my audience are watching this on a phone. Are they going to see the difference between a lens 4 times the price? I'd hazard a guess no. Are they looking at it on a big 65-inch TV? They might, but for the best part, do you? That's the ultimate thing. But there is one thing that this lens has that absolutely blows away the Sony G lens. And this thing caught me by surprise. This Viltrox 20mm lens weighs like nothing. Honestly, every time I've picked up the Sony ZV-E1, I actually go, I haven't put a battery in when this lens is attached. That Sony lens is not hugely heavy, but it's heavier than this lens. But so many times I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't put a battery in. It's that light. This is an incredibly light lens, and the difference in size, while not huge, it is an easier fit into your camera bag. Just is. It's that bit smaller. Sure, you don't get all the bells and whistles, but for less than $200, for me, and for any content creator out there, I think this thing that's a no-brainer. It is an absolute no-brainer for this lens. I do not think you will get better value on a lens this year or next year or probably the year after unless Viltrox outdo themselves.